Revenge, child alcoholism, cannibalism, and a whole lot of blood. I'm talking about the one film that contains all the elements for a perfect Christmas Day release. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, senior editor of Creative Screenwriting Magazine, and I love that Sweeney Todd has a Christmas Day release this year. And today, I'm very pleased to have with us the man behind the adaptation, screenwriter John Logan. If you dig these podcasts, make sure to look for Creative Screenwriting Magazine on newsstands and in Barnes & Nobles and Borders bookshops in the United States, Canada, and Western Europe. If you want to know what's in our latest issue, of course, you could go to www.creativescreenwriting.com for all the details. But now, without further ado, let's jump right onto the stage of our sold-out screening after I introduced screenwriter John Logan to talk about his latest adaptation, Sweeney Todd. Great job, by the way. Great job. No easy adaptation. We're going to talk about it. So we always kind of start with breaking in stories. Talk about breaking in with getting your WGA card and your first agent. To my knowledge, it was all kind of around 1996's Tornado, which seemed to resemble another film that was coming.
It was before that, as a matter of fact.
Was it?
Yeah, I had people always ask me how did you break into movies, and how did you sort of work your up the food chain? And I will say, well, I didn't. I actually went from being a completely unknown, starving playwright right into writing a movie, because I was living in Chicago. I spent 10 years writing plays. Loved it. Not very successful. My day job was shelving books at a law library every single day. And I would do that, and then I would go home and write plays, and they'd be put on. And I met a man who worked in New York at HBO, which then had an office in New York. Then he went to CAA, which I'd never heard of. And he said, "Do you want to be my first client?" And I said, "Okay," because I didn't have an agent. And he said, "Come out to LA and bring 10 movie ideas." So I borrowed money, and I flew out to LA with 10 movie ideas, one of which was one line, and this is the line that is responsible for me sitting on the stage, which was King Lear in the NFL. And that became Any Given Sunday. And I wrote that first screenplay, and Oliver Stone did it, and there you have it.
I never heard that it was a pitch like that. That's great. King Lear in the NFL.
That was it.
That's awesome.
26 drafts later, it became Any Given Sunday. I should clarify that. It's not like there you go.
All right, fair enough. What did you get your WGA card on? Was it Tornado? It was Tornado, right?
Yeah, no, it was Any Given Sunday. Tornado
was Any Given Sunday. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. You adapted the documentary The Battle Over Citizen Kane to an extent. You were at least inspired by it for it to become RKO 281. It's really a film that changed your career. After you did it, everybody was just all over you, for lack of a better word. Right. Talk about that change, going, all due respect, of course, sir, from Bats to RKO 281 and beyond.
It was everyone's experience as a writer is unique. Your experience, my experience, it's all unique. Because I come from the theater and my world was collaboration, and when you're a playwright, all you do is collaborate with directors and actors and producers and front of house managers and designers. I wanted to collaborate with directors because directors, I don't understand directing, I have no interest in directing, I don't understand how they do it, but there were a lot of directors I really admired, and one of the directors I admired most was Ridley Scott. And I just really wanted to work with Ridley. So once I did Any Given Sunday, I had sort of an entree to start meeting those directors I'd always admired. And my agents told me that Ridley Scott was interested in doing something on the making of Citizen Kane. And I went after it like a hungry dog. I just said, I have to do that. You don't understand. So I finally met with Ridley, and I think I spoke for 2 solid hours without taking a breath. And I ended up doing it. And the script that resulted became sort of my calling card, it's a script to this day I think is among the best things I've ever written, and it became the script that I got known by, and I'm thankful for it.
Did you guys have to get the rights to the documentary?
No, it actually wasn't based on the documentary. It was an original thing. They eventually bought the rights to the documentary later, but It was just an original script.
I was always confused by the credits of that. There's so much to talk about between Gladiator and Aviator. They're both great movies. I'm gonna boil it down to this because I want to get to tonight's movie. What was the toughest scene that really kept you up at night, that kept you coming back to it again and again, in both Aviator and Gladiator?
That is one of the best questions I've ever been asked. That's a true writer's question. I know without a doubt what it is in Gladiator. If you've seen the movie, there's a scene where Russell Crowe, he's like this anonymous gladiator, and he finally sort of exposes himself. He takes off his little face mask, turns to Joaquin Phoenix, communist, and the people of Rome, and says, "I am blah, 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 and I will have my revenge." The blah, 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 blah suggests the mental block I had about the years I spent trying to write that line. That was because I knew it was the linchpin, and it needed one of those classic lines that was just strong and masculine and definitive and mysterious and elegiac and poetical. And it killed me just trying. The scene was fine. I understood the scene. I understood the mechanics. It was trying to write those words was the killer. And The Aviator, there was not a minute of it that wasn't hard. It was a killer.
Well, wait. How'd you solve that problem?
I kept working at it.
Okay.
I mean, for me,
was it a monologue that you then cut down? Or?
Exactly. That's exactly right. My instinct always is to overwrite, is to just write. The first draft of Aviator was 250 pages. It was. I don't recommend this, by the way. It works for me because maybe because I come from the theater, and theater is all about verbiage and eloquence and the spoken word. I tend to really overwrite, and the process of rewriting for me is just boiling it down and condensing. So that began with a large speech that finally became those 2 sentences that he eventually says.
All right, now to Aviator, of course.
Yeah, Aviator was as I say, was all very difficult. The choice I made with Aviator from the very beginning was to write it unlike any other screenplay. So I encourage you to go out and buy it so you can read it and discover how that's so. I wanted to write it novelistically from Howard Hughes' perspective because so much of the movie involved the fact that he was freaked out by doorknobs. He was inspired by the sky. He was freaked out by germs. So you had to sort of see it through his eyes. So I had to write it. I chose to write it very novelistically with a lot long descriptions about what he's experiencing and what he's feeling as he sort of moves through the landscape of the movie. So just that sort of dramaturgical choice created real difficulty because I'm not a prose writer and I had to come up with adjectives. And it was challenging. I think the hardest thing to write specifically in The Aviator were the Kate Hepburn scenes because you're faced with a character like Kate Hepburn and you're like, well, Jesus Christ, how do you write Kate Hepburn? It's like she's so articulate and intelligent and funny and I have such admiration for her as a woman and as a character that I just slaved trying to find the right sort of wit and sensibility and sort of rhythms to her language. You
were talking a second ago about how you wanted to focus on his fear of doorknobs, etc., but that really comes in strongly more or less in the third act. And what was so interesting was you really kept your A story alive, kind of him versus the government, building his company and stuff like that. How did you pick your ending point? I always thought the ending point of The Aviator was a very interesting moment where you see kind of his guards kind of taking over a little and you just kind of in your mind can play out the part of the story that has the most mystery that we've always wondered about.
If anyone ever writes a book on me, you must write it, because that's the point. That's exactly the point. The first thing I came up with in The Aviator, which is it was 5 years of really hard work, because you take the life of a man like Howard Hughes, and there's so much you could dramatize. And I was working with Michael Mann at the time, and he was like, do whatever you want. You want to do the young years, you want to do the older years, you want to do The Aviator, you want to do anything you want. And I chose to focus on aviation because that's very cinematic. But I knew from the very beginning I wanted the ending of the movie to be a moment of huge triumph for him, where all of a sudden, unexpectedly, his own inner demons come along and grab hold of him, so you suggest to the audience the sort of doomed life he would live after that. I just wanted to write a tragedy, and to me, that idea of a character soaring like Icarus, it was Icarus, soaring so high, then all of a sudden the wings start to melt, I thought would be a dramatic ending.
It was a great ending point. And we had you in the screening series for Aviator.
Yeah.
We recorded it, and it was right before the era of podcasting, so I'm actually trying to get that recording into iTunes, because as you know, tonight is going to be a podcast in iTunes.
Right.
You'll be heard around the world, in case I didn't tell you.
Excellent. I won't swear anymore.
No, please. Actually, people stop tuning in if it's too G-rated. So, to my knowledge, you saw the original Broadway production of Sweeney Todd 3 times. Talk about what struck you about it way back in 1979 when you first saw it.
It was, to anyone lucky enough to have seen that original Broadway production, you'll understand what I'm saying. It was one of the most mesmeric evenings in the theater I've ever spent. And I grew up in the theater. I love the theater much more than movies. It's just I love the theater. There's something to me so exciting and visceral about it. And I was a high school student. I was living in New Jersey. I went to New York to see shows like every weekend. I got a half-price ticket. I was at the then Uris Theater, now the Gershwin Theater, where Wicked sadly has taken over. And I was sitting in row. Oh,
really?
Sorry.
You know what?
Yeah.
I love it. I completely agree with you.
Okay.
I was totally not enthralled by Wicked.
Well, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you for saying
all
that.
respect to the creators.
Yeah, all respect to the artisans.
Yeah.
They made it look really pretty, but I was bored out of my frickin' mind. So, all right, thank you. Please, back to the theater.
So I'm there,
and there was no blood. There was no blood.
And there was no blood. I know. So I'm in row ZZZ, way at the back, this huge barn of a theater, an unforgiving theater space. And they start doing Sweeney Todd, and it's this huge operatic spectacle. It's 3 hours long. It is rich in emotion, rich in drama, rich in that incredible symphonic Sondheim score. And near the end of the first act, Len Carrier, who was playing Sweeney Todd, did the song Epiphany, which is the song where Johnny Depp goes through the streets and says, "You, sir, too, sir, how about a shave?" And it's the moment it's sort of the liminal moment in the show where his personal quest becomes a universal epistemological quest to exert his revenge on all mankind. So it is the moment of the show. You have to pay extra for words like epistemological, by the way. So I hope you appreciate that. I've been saving it all day for tonight. So Len Carrier was this little dot on the stage.
Wait, I just thought of the title of the book I'm going to write about your life. John Logan, An Epistological Life.
That's good. So he's doing Epiphany. I'm sitting in row ZZZ, and I swear to God, I thought he was going to kill me. It was the one time in my life I have been frightened in the theater because he had so much passion. When he went, "You, sir, too, sir, how about a shave?" I thought he was talking to me. And I've never had a moment like that in the theater since that point, where it was so absolutely, thrilling. And I've loved passionately, desperately, the musical since that moment.
It's great. I pulled together a brief history that I'm going to go through because just to show people all the different versions and possible research you went through. To my knowledge, these incidents may or may not have taken place in 1748. They were printed in newspapers. It first appeared in a Penny Dreadful novel titled The String of Pearls, a romance written by Thomas Becket Prest in 1846. Then there was a play in the 1840s, a 1936 film, and a 1973 play by Christopher Bond, who was credited tonight. And, of course, he inserted the Judge Turpin revenge plot before Sondheim and Hugh Wheeler made it into their story into a musical. How much were you pulling from all these different sources? Because there's so many.
All of them. I stand here representing the work of Hugh Wheeler, who wrote the book for the original musical, and Christopher Bond, who wrote the original melodrama that Stephen Sondheim saw that inspired him to write the musical. I am entirely in debt to their work. They created Sweeney Todd. My job was to adapt, to shape, to make cinematic what was theatrical. But there is nothing in this that was not suggested by those men before me and by those terrific writers, before me. And certainly in the process of working on it, I spent a lot of time with the score, with the original libretto, with Chris Bond's play, and with just general mid-19th century research about Penny Dreadfuls and the Grand Guignol and all that sort of landscape.
It's a dream gig. How'd you first come on to the project? And to my knowledge, Sam Mendes was originally attached to direct.
Yeah, it is a dream gig. It's certainly my dream gig. It happened because I was working with, I'd done a bunch of movies at DreamWorks, and I was meeting with Walter Parkes and Laurie MacDonald, who at that point were running DreamWorks, and they mentioned sort of in an offhand way, knowing that I love theater, that they were interested in acquiring the rights to Sweeney Todd. And I think I sort of leapt over the desk and just sort of grabbed them by the throat and said, you don't understand. And I went through the whole thing, and I'm singing the score, and it's like...
Was security ever called?
Which, believe me, not many serious writers do in meetings, so I recommend it. If you can sing an entire Broadway score, they will remember you. So I said, give me a shot at it. And I knew Sam Mendes a little bit, so I said, I want to talk to Sam about it. So before I sat down with Sam, I prepared, because my belief in life is preparation is everything for a writer. You do never go into a room unless you are prepared. So I spent a few months just researching the mid-19th century in London, so I could talk about what Fleet Street really was, what it would look like, what it would smell like, what the world would be like, because you can't have in a movie generic 19th century. You must be very specific. And I chose 1851 because I wanted to reference the Hyde Park and the Crystal Palace. So I researched the period, and then I met with Sam, and he and I talked about it. He's a theater guy, I'm a theater guy. We got on really well, and that was it, and we were off.
When did he fall out? Why did Mendes fall out?
Well, there was a long time. There was a long process when we were working together. The first thing Sam and I did was we went to meet Stephen Sondheim. And the most important element to me about what you saw tonight is the genius of Stephen Sondheim. And for me, it was like meeting God. It was like, it truly was. And you know, I don't get nervous meeting film professionals because they're my colleagues. But to me, there are two great artists alive today who have shaped world theater, and they were Harold Pinter and Stephen Sondheim. So meeting him and getting to work on his masterpiece for 5 years was the single greatest pleasure I have had as a writer in my life. And we worked hand in glove over every page of the screenplay. So what you saw tonight reflects his work as much as mine. So,
well, right, he was involved all the way, even up to casting, correct?
And beyond, all the way. You know, he had both contractual approval and also just sort of moral strength, because he was the man who created it, and we would never want to do anything he was not totally supportive of. So I worked with Sam for a really long time, with Sam and Steve.
How long would you say?
About 2 years. Wow. And Sam decided to do Jarhead. And very graciously said, "Look, go with God. Find a director who'll commit to this now." And the first and only name on the list was Tim Burton.
A lot of times when new directors come on, they try and bring on a new screenwriter. Mm-hmm. Was there ever a chance of you getting cut? No pun intended.
No, because I mean I was deeply involved at that point, and Tim and I, from the very first meeting we had together, were clearly seeing the same movie, because he'd seen the original London production, which was a year after the Broadway production, and we remembered similar images, and we talked about it in the same way. So from the very first meeting, we were working in concert.
Hollywood likes to pigeonhole people. You have experience as a playwright and obviously as a screenwriter, but no real experience in musicals. What was it like for you to kind of delve into this, where there's a lot more than just your A story and your dialogue and your characters?
It was hard. It was hard because we made a decision that I don't know if it was apparent when you were watching it. But one of the things we wanted to do is make the audience forget you were watching a musical. So we took out what they call buttons, which is, after a song, there's a da-da-da-da-da, bump, so the audience knows it's time to applaud. We took out all of those, so we wanted to do something more or less seamless. So the songs would just sort of blend into the dialogue would blend into the songs, everything would be underscored as much as possible. So you would stop thinking, oh, here's a musical number, here's a dialogue scene. We tried to get rid of all those lines of demarcation. So simply adapting the musical is hard enough, but then trying to do it in that sort of narrative flow was also very, very challenging. I mean, it was a lot of work.
For our January-February issue, our journalist David Wharton interviewed you. I've obviously had a look at the article. One of the things you told him that I thought was really interesting was in your screenplay, you bolded some of the stuff so that you could differentiate between what was a song and what was actually spoken dialogue. Is that true? Tell me how you came up with that idea and other tricks that you kind of did along that process.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it very clear that when actors are reading it, that they'd know what they were singing and what they were speaking. So the simple device I used was I just put all the song lyrics were in bold face, and everything else was just in normal type. And I tried to keep sort of stage directions, unlike The Aviator, which was the sort of the most excessive I could possibly be as a writer. I tried to keep this very minimal, just to suggest the mood of sort of what was going on. Just because paramount to me was momentum, was that it had a melodramatic thriller pace, and it moved very quickly, which meant we cut a lot of music, we streamlined things, and just sort of forced it along. So I wanted to make the screenplay sort of clip by as well.
Obviously, a lot of writers outline you had a lot of material to use for your potential outline because this was an adaptation. Talk about your process of kind of breaking this down, because it is, as you said, a 3-hour play, and obviously you're beholden to it. So I mean, how do you start cutting Sondheim, and how do you figure
with great care?
Well, yeah. Right, but I mean, you had to cut songs. I know as a fact you did. Talk about that process of cutting and collaborating with him and saying, "Yeah, I remember that song you wrote. We're going to cut it."
Yeah. Well, two things. First of all, from the very first meeting I had with Steve Sondheim, what he said was, I don't want a filmed version of the stage play. I want a movie. And he truly understands the language of cinema. He understands what a movie is. So he had no resistance to rethinking the equation, if you will. And in terms of shaping and deciding what would stay and what would go, it was all made for dramaturgical reasons, the same reasons you'd make a decision about any plot, what to keep in, is did it relate to the spine of the piece? And what I decided very early on is, for me, the spine that was most interesting was Sweeney Todd, Mrs. Lovett, and Toby, and that sort of little triangular, bizarre family. So what I tried to do, because I thought that was an interesting story to tell, was sort of build up Toby and Mrs. Lovett to be sort of vital characters all the way through, and elements of the stage musical that did not refract off of that primary relationship were just cut, just brutally. And Steve totally understood that, because he understood where we were trying to get to emotionally with the piece.
There was one song that you cut that, as you told David Wharton, came back into your script, because you realized that just the exposition and the setup of it was so great. Could you talk about that song? It was the Joanna song.
Yeah, when you first meet Joanna, she sings "Green Finch and Linnet Bird," da 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 da. But better than that. But that's the song. And initially, I'd cut that song because she was going to be a non-singing character, and I thought, well, there's a certain purity to the fact that there are singing characters and there are non-singing characters. And it was the foolish consistency of the hobgoblin of little minds, is what it was. And so I wrote this little introductory scene where she's like walking in the park and she meets Anthony in this lovely little page and a half scene together. And that was it, And I was sorry to lose the song because I happen to think it's a beautiful song, but for various reasons I'd convinced myself that was the right thing to do. And Tim said, well, I really like that song. And I was like, well, dude, I like it too. And Steve Sondheim really likes it. But and the way that we actually worked together was interesting, because Tim's never directed a musical either. So what we did was we took the original Broadway cast recording and we made audio tapes with all the cuts in the script. So we always had a running oral commentary of what the film was going to sound like musically. So every time we took a verse out, we would do another version of it. The sound editor, Mike Hine, would do a version without that verse. So if we transposed two songs, we would always be able to listen to the entire movie, if you will. And it quickly became apparent that if we used a slightly truncated version of Greenfinch and Linnet Bird, it would be a much better introduction to the character and a much more fuller and emotional introduction of the character. So I was happy to bring it back.
I love this whole mixtape thing. Did you guys give each other notes with the mixtapes?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was.
How many songs did you cut?
Well, we cut an hour of music, so an hour of the show. So we cut a quartet, a Judge's song.
There was a Judge Turpin song.
There's a Judge Turpin song. We cut a few songs. Not to mention the Ballad of Sweeney Todd we cut.
There's always that. I was going to get to, but yeah, was that a difficult cut? Because you would think...
it was by far the most...
I would think that would be the most difficult
The most difficult cut. If you know the show, it begins and ends with this presentational number called the Ballad of Sweeney Todd. And you hear the music in the movie, and it's a magnificent song. It's just brilliant. But it is a chorus. It is the chorus singing to the audience in the theater. And we had decided we wanted no chorus because that seems sort of a bogus convention on screen. It's hard enough to just have people sing, but then to have the faceless people of London singing as well. Suddenly we were doing like fucking Oklahoma, and we had all respect, podcast to Oklahoma, to Rodgers and Hammerstein. That's not what we wanted to do. So, but I tried to keep the Ballad of Sweeney Todd. It was in the script until the second week of filming. We had cast the people we were going to use. They had recorded the song. But we 2 weeks into filming, we realized it wasn't. There was no way it was going to work. So out it went.
Talk about your habit. How many hours a day do you write? And to my knowledge, as you told Wharton, you used to be kind of a night writer. Now you're an early morning type of guy.
Yeah, I used to be when I lived in Chicago until 4 years ago. And I got into the habit of writing at night, first because I had this day job and I had no choice. I worked all day and I wrote all night. And then when I was able to finally, thank God, to quit my day job and just write movies, I was still sort of in the habit of writing at night. But what I found is that people from LA would start calling early, and because of the time difference, I started getting bothered all the time. So the only time I could start writing before LA was really awake and bothering me was in the morning. Because I didn't have an office, I just wrote in my house. So I started writing in the morning, and now I get up at 4:30 or 5, and I work first thing in the morning and just write.
For how long?
But mind you, it's like an hour past my bedtime, so don't think that's so virtuous.
How long do you write for when you write?
It depends. If I'm writing a first draft, nonstop. If it's anything other than a first draft, 3 or 4 hours, maybe. It just depends. It depends on what it is and where the thing is in the process.
Do you have a page count that you shoot for each
No.
day? No. Okay. And also earlier, just because we got a little distance from it. Did you outline this? Were there note cards of
No.
your structure? No, so
No.
that was not an important thing.
No.
Okay, all right.
Only because I had the libretto. I had Hugh Wheeler's libretto.
Sure.
I had my Bible was actually the score, the actual piano score of the show. That's what I used.
Oh, can you read music? Was that something that was important to you?
No, I learned to read music. I learned to read enough music to understand how to read a score.
That's impressive. What do you do to battle writer's block if you get it?
I don't. I've never had writer's block. If anything, I have just the opposite, which is too many ideas, and the synapses jump too much. And I have to sort of discipline ideas down.
Obviously, one of the greatest things about this is it is definitely a rated R musical.
Yeah.
Was there ever any talk about trying to do this wussy PG-13 version or something like that? Just dollars and cents.
Not from the creators. No. I mean, it is. As I say, the first time Tim Burton and I met, what we talked about was the blood. We talked about at the first throat slitting when on stage when he slits Pirelli's throat. Sweeney would go like this, and the blood would arc across the stage, and the light would catch it, and it was very upsetting and very beautiful at the same time, and that was it. We wanted to do a movie that was lyrical and beautiful and really upsetting, and it would be all about the blood, really about the blood. So we had one studio meeting. There was one meeting that had me, Tim, Steve Sondheim, the other producers, and our two studios, and it was just said, this is an R-rated movie. That is what it is, and they absolutely bought it. They supported it 100%, and in an act of absolute grandeur, decided to release it at Christmas. So,
which I think that is brilliant.
So do I. I mean, my dream for Sweeney Todd is that those families all go to the American Girl store and then they go see Sweeney Todd. That's my dream of a good holiday.
It could all happen at the Grove. During the great sequence when they're killing everyone, there's that nice old man that sits in the chair. You're wondering, is he going to be spared? But, he's not. And then there's the guy that has his wife there who is spared. Could you just talk about kind of creating those visuals underneath the music? Because that's a great place for the writer's mind to wander, and to really put great stuff in there.
Another good question, very pertinent. One of the things that we talked about a lot in pre-production and in working on the script was how boring it is just to have the camera on a person singing, because all of a sudden it's like the Tony Orlando and Don show, and they're just singing and singing. And so we wanted to make sure that it was visually alive, because cinema is about movement, it's about action, it's about the eye has to sort of move, or things become lachrymose, or things become really, really boring. So every song we talked about very specifically in terms of what are we seeing, what is the visual cinematic progress through it. Certainly in all the violent sequences and all the throat slittings, Tim always said those are our dance numbers. Those are our tap routines, and every one has to be different. You can't just keep slitting a throat. You have to do it in different ways. So we had a great deal of, I must say, very morbid fun, thinking about all the ways you could slice and slab and stab and cut and dice.
It was great. I mean, there was two other songs where you really got out there, kind of out of the room, away from the actors. Obviously, there's the one where it's in his mind, you sir, when he's kind of fantasizing, and then he's back on his knees in the barbershop. Was that kind of a visual that you came up with, or was that?
Yeah, that was probably the hardest for me as a writer to think of a way to do it, because it was the moment that I remember from the Broadway show most, where suddenly Len Carey was jumps down from the barber, he's going on the lip of the stage, he's talking to the audience. It was so dynamic, and I thought, well, how can one do that in a movie, and in a naturalistic movie where we're trying not to have any narrative conventions? And what I decided was the way to do it is to break the fourth wall, to go into a different convention. You go inside his head just for that number. No one responds to him. He's like this tiger prowling through the streets. And I must say, of anything in the script, it's one of the things I'm most proud of, because it was a desperate decision to do it, and it works amazingly well, I think.
Well, Mrs. Lovett's dream song was also, which song is that? Because I always forget the title.
By the Sea.
By the Sea. By the Sea. By the Sea was absolutely a great blending of visuals along with the music. Could you talk about just kind of really getting out there, because the whole tone of the film changed, the lighting changed. Right. I mean, it was perfect.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we always knew that Beyond By the Sea had to be Mrs. Lovett. It had to be inside her mind, because of just what the song says, and it's her vision of what bourgeois reality would be like if she and Sweeney were married. The interesting thing about it is, I don't think Mrs. Lovett's ever been to the seashore. She has no goddamn idea what the seashore looks like. She's this horrible little venal whore who lives in the East End of London. Well, she doesn't know what the seaside looks like, so her images are from postcards, or from rotogravure pictures, or from magazines. She's built up this fantasy of what middle-class domesticity would be like with Sweeney Todd at the seaside. So it becomes like a fantasy sequence in her head. And Tim obviously grabbed onto that to do all the visual stuff.
It was great. Talk about for a second, a lot of people get confused and they think like, it's an adaptation of a musical. He really just put it up on the screen. I mean, in the process of adaptation, aside from the cutting, which we've just been through, which was you had to do because you're not going to make this 3-hour musical into a film. Talk about some of the invention, some of this stuff, because it's interesting to think of inventing new pieces of dialogue, even new musical moments. But when you have Sondheim sitting next to you, you could do that. So tell us some of the things that you invented that people might otherwise not notice that you're really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the scenes with the judge I invented. The scenes where he pulls Anthony in to talk to him. He talks to Joanna.
So those
later.
porn books were from your research, obviously.
Exactly. Because on stage he has a song to introduce him, and that planted the character. And we weren't doing the song, so we needed to introduce the character. So I wrote all those introductory stuff with him. The sort of relationship between Toby and Mrs. Lovett I created in the second half, and he sings "Not While I'm Around." She feels really bad about taking him down to the bakehouse. And her sort of persistent longing for this impossible dream of a relationship with Sweeney Todd, I feel somewhat responsible for it too. I mean, all of it is suggested in the show. It's all there. It's just different areas become emphasized or de-emphasized depending on whomever the adapter would be.
A lot of times when actors come on, there's kind of sometimes rewrites done for the actors. It was interesting that aside from you and Burton never doing a musical, neither had Helena Bonham Carter or Johnny Depp. And to my knowledge, I wrote a story for Variety about how Johnny Depp said no to every voice coach that was sent to him. Is that correct? Yeah? It kind of cracked me up. What kind of rewrites did you need to do once Sondheim gave them the approval?
It was very limited. Helena was, just loved the character of Mrs. Lovett. She understood it. She understood it, to her bones. Johnny had a very interesting take on Sweeney, which was incredibly helpful to me as a writer. And I think, by the way, it behooves writers to work with actors as much as possible. Actors to me are never the enemy. Even they may exasperate you, they are never the enemy. They are your biggest supporters. They are the people who are going to bring your words to life or not. And what I do is listen to actors. And if they have trouble saying a line, there's a reason for it. And either they need to change, or I need to change, or the line needs to change to make sure we're all on the same page. So I always, I insist on time with actors to work on the script. And Johnny's response to Sweeney was brilliant, which is, he knows that Sweeney is a man who has this sort of symphony playing in his head all the time. He's a very internal character. He doesn't interact. He doesn't look at any of the other characters. And he exists sort of in this sort of cauldron of his own sort of pain and melancholy. So he thought Sweeney should speak less. So if I wrote a 2-sentence thing, could I make it 1 sentence? Could we find just less words? So he wasn't as verbose as Mrs. Lovett, for example, which is dead on appropriate to the brooding character who is Sweeney Todd.
It almost goes back to what you were saying about Gladiator, in which it's just cutting and cutting and cutting to reach that perfect moment, which was interesting. Obviously, some writers never get to go on set, but you were very involved in this process. What did you have to do on set? Were there any rewrites that needed to be done during the filming?
No, not at all. I mean, I was on set because I was a producer, not because I was a writer. In this case, because it's about 60% sung and 40% spoken, and all the singing had to be pre-recorded. So that was recorded months before, and that was set in stone. I mean, we had the orchestra and we had the orchestrations done. There was a little re-recording done later, but mostly they played the track. So everything had to be minutely choreographed long before we started filming. So there was no improvisation. It was simply we knew what we were doing when we started, and we did it. And it was in my experience the most efficient and pleasant shoot I've ever been involved with.
How long was the shoot?
About 45 days.
What was the budget of the film?
The budget, I can't really say the budget of the film, but it was a shockingly low budget. Because the thing you have to remember about Sweeney Todd is no one wanted to make it. No one wanted to make this film because, it wasn't always Tim Burton and Johnny Depp. Originally it was this insane operatic musical about a homicidal maniac that was with tons of blood in it. It was only when Tim and Johnny became completely attached, and people get excited about it. And even then, only to a certain degree. We had to make it at a real price, and it was a rock hard price, and in a certain number of days, and there was no wiggle room whatsoever. This cost half of what you probably think it cost, and it was all filmed. There's not a single exterior shot in it. It's all filmed on sound stages at Pinewood in England.
If I grabbed a number out of the air like 40, would it be under a 40, over a 40?
It would be over a 40.
Okay. Under a 50, over a 50. So, all right. We're going to open it up to the crowd in a second here. A few tough questions. They're kind of indicative of the original piece, though. So it's not really, the onus isn't really on you, but it's just things people have always said. Obviously, when they're doing the Pretty Women song in the beginning, you could have just sliced him easily, and of course people would have grabbed their hats and gone home. You did a great job with having Beatles show up right at the right moment. Was there ever anything more to that scene that you guys were kind of going back and forth on? Because that's just a criticism that's been around since as long as the play's been around, to my knowledge.
No, I don't think so, because one of the things I personally celebrate about Sweeney Todd is it's a melodrama. It is an old-fashioned melodrama with twists and reversals and reveals and secret characters becoming out, and it really does harken back to the 19th century.
Sure.
And I for one celebrate that and think part of the fun of the movie, I mean dark fun perhaps, is it is unapologetically a thriller plot.
Some of the journalists that I saw it with it were never familiar with the previous work, and they thought it was a bit predictable. That's the only word that was being used. Not your fault. Not your fault. Tell Sondheim, okay? That the homeless woman was, of course, his wife. Because it's usually that thing in movies where, see her once, she's homeless. See her twice or three times, have her looming around, there could be a deeper connection. Was there a consideration about masking that character any greater, or...
No.
No? Okay. So just, it was indicative of the original? Yeah. All right. We actually got a question emailed to us from one of our podcast listeners. A few years ago, when you were nominated for the Aviator, there was a Q&A you did at the WGA. I was there with the other nominees. Her question reads, which I love, as, what was it like writing something so dark while wearing a yellow bathrobe? Because of that Q&A, you said that you love to write everything you write in a yellow bathrobe. Is that true? Did you write this in a yellow bathrobe?
Now you know a little too much about John Logan, don't you? If the singing wasn't enough. Well, all right, okay. All right, you want to know?
That was a question.
I get up in the morning, I take a bath, I read, I put my bathrobe on, I go to write. It was great writing Sweeny Todd in a yellow bathrobe.
All right, good. She will be happy when she hears this podcast. We're going to open it up to the crowd. Right there, you on the aisle. Question was, how much did the lyrics change, and if so, who made the changes? Was it you and Sondheim together, or did he sometimes go off on his own too?
Sondheim did all the lyric changes. He and I worked on them. We discussed them, at great length, and they didn't change a lot. The backstory about Lucy and Sweeney Todd, that changed because you see Sweeney in that, and so we introduced the Judge and the Beadle with different lyrics. There's some different lyrics at various points because Sondheim used this as an opportunity to fix lyrics that had always bothered him. But it was thrilling because it's like, he's in New York, I'm here, we're on the phone, and we're discussing a lyric for an hour, and it's one word, but it was thrilling.
Another question from the crowd, again on the aisle, you, ma'am. Musicals have show-stopping moments. Sweeney Todd has a lot of those. How did you work them into the pacing of the script?
I really didn't. I mean, that was the order of the songs, with the exception of two in the second act we transposed to, is absolutely the way it was in the Broadway show, and that's the storytelling of Sweeney Todd. So the fact that those sort of dramatic peaks and valleys come is entirely due to Stephen Sondheim.
Another question. That's a great question. And in regards to how it looks on the page, we discussed earlier about the song being bolded. How do you integrate the visuals next to the lyrics? I mean, there's some versions of screenwriting software where you could have two columns. Were you using something like that?
No. I didn't want to divide up the lyrics. I mean, I wanted to keep the lyrics as blocks because I tried to interrupt them as rarely as possible. So I would set up the visual life of the song before it or after it. Or if there was a slug change or a major break between two verses, I would just put stage directions in there. I almost never divided up it's like you're looking at poetry. I would never divide up a stanza.
And how long was your draft? That was the shooting draft?
Like 120 pages, very standard.
Great. Another question. Two questions. First one was in regard to the cuts in the song Little Priest. There were some knee slapper humorous moments that were cut out. He was curious about that. Also, the 2006 revival of Sweeney Todd. Did it influence anything in this film?
Right, yes. First, yeah, the song Little Priest, which is a song they do in the corner, they're talking about putting people in the pies, has these sort of music hall turns in them, as you say, where the characters sort of joke with each other. It was in early drafts of the script, but it became sort of thuddingly obvious that it was stage humor. It was like vaudeville humor in Chekhov. It didn't sort of work cinematically. As much as I tried to make it work, and even Sondheim would argue about how knee slapping they were. But so he happily suggested, why don't we just lose all those and just keep it as a song between them. The revival you're talking about was directed by John Doyle in New York. Tremendous revival of Sweeney Todd that had Patti LuPone and Michael Service in it. The script was done by the time that came out, so it actually didn't affect it at all, although I enjoyed it immensely.
Another question. Big question. What was the biggest sacrifice you've had to make as a writer in your whole career?
Yeah, I had to give up my dream of being a song and dance man. Clearly, no. I mean that's a very legitimate question, and I'll give you an honest answer. I love writing. I have never wanted to do anything else in my life. From the minute I took my first playwriting class when I was in college, I said, I want to do this the rest of my life. I want to be a dramatist. I want to be a dramatist and write dialogue, whether it's a play or a movie or a TV show or a TV movie. That's all I've ever wanted to do. And I've never been interested in directing or acting. I'm not interested in producing. The only reason I'm a producer on this was to protect the original show, and I felt it was important someone do that. So the sacrifices, I've made no sacrifices. I mean, when I was a playwright, I had no money. I worked like a dog. I didn't expect anything else because I got the incredible opportunity to be a playwright and to see my plays go on, and that was worth it. It didn't matter whether I got paid or not. And it's the same way, I wake up the same way now, just wanting to tell stories and be a dramatist. Having said that, the difficulty is in dissatisfaction with your own work. I mean, any writer worth the name writer, lives with seething discontent about their work, and I'm no exception. So it's always a mixed blessing, but I certainly have no interest in doing anything else.
Backing that up, what are you discontented about in tonight's film? If you could go back and change something.
I don't second guess myself like that. It's done. Once the film is done, it's done.
All right. Good answer. Another question. There was a motif of quarantine in the film Aviator. Was there something?
No, you mean just like a motif? Like, is there a thematic element, a visual thematic element, or narrative thematic element? Well, yeah. I mean, the actual answer to that is yes, there is. But it's so subtle that very few people, other than me, who takes great glee in it. Very early on, practically his first line when he comes off the ship with Andy at the beginning of the movie, he says, in this once familiar place, I feel ghosts everywhere. And then Mrs. Lovett said people think it's haunted. So there's talks about ghosts and haunting all the way through the movie. Right at the end, she says, we run away and all the ghosts will know that they never go away. Joanna says to Anthony. So if there's a leitmotif, it's very light, but it has to do with people being haunted by the past and sort of demonized by the choices they've made. Although it's paper thin.
Well, it's also obviously about revenge and how it overtakes you, and by the time he finally kills the judge in the end, it's almost anticlimactic because he's been through so much other pain that he's ruined his life worse. You, ma'am, in the front row. Has anyone ever told you that you could not write?
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of people told me I can't write. It's yeah. I mean, every writer in the world gets told you're a bad writer. I mean, especially if you're a playwright and you get reviews that are like, quit writing. Yeah, absolutely. But it's not. But those things never had any impact on me, even when I was a completely unknown, penniless playwright, because I couldn't do anything else. I could either shelve books or be a playwright. So I figured I'd be a playwright.
Another question. After this experience, do you have any desire to pen an original cinematic musical?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Hopefully with Sondheim at your side again. All the way in the back against the wall. It's just so sad. I got to call on you. Good question. After getting to do a major dream job, what other dream jobs are out there eluding you that you'd like to catch up to? That's
a really good question. I mean, the thing I'd like to do most as a musical, which relates to this question, is I'd like to, as an artist, I'd like to write the book to a stage musical. And I'm talking to people about doing that. In terms of movies, or even in terms of plays, it's always just what's the next story, what's the next interesting story that's going to sort of grab my attention, rather than there's a particular genre or a particular story or a particular director. It's just what is the next interesting story. And but for the strike, I'd be writing it now.
And we will get to that, by the way. That'll be our last question. Another question right there, you, sir. Could you talk about your research process for RKO 281 and what you had to change to make it more cinematic?
Yeah, you mean change from history? Yes. It would take a book to explain it all. Certainly, the research was it started with general biographies of Orson Welles and Randolph, Hearst, and then went into more specific Hollywood research, and it was all the things you would imagine, and mostly spending a lot of time with Citizen Kane, studying the movie in detail. And like The Aviator, or even like Gladiator, which is based somewhat on historical events, always adapting history is simply making the hard choices about what story you want to tell. Because, if you talk to Bill Condon, he would do one version. You talk to Eric Roth, he would do another version. I had my version of what the battle over Citizen Kane might be. So it's just figuring out what it is that excites in the individual writer about the bit of history or the historical characters.
Did you ever get to go through any RKO actual files, like studio memos and stuff like that?
No.
Okay, interesting. You, ma'am, right there, the blonde, yes. Question was in regards, just to boil it down really quick, to kind of the similarity between Maximus and Gladiator and Sweeney Todd here, having nothing to lose starting out, kind of being an outsider, and also in relation to, I forgot the rest of the questions, so you're going to just have to
I didn't. You were absolutely right, and you were the first person to mention that, and I think you're absolutely right, other than me, is Sweeney Todd's story is Maximus' story. It's a man with his happy family, it's all taken away from him, and he wants revenge on the person who did it to him. And instead of just going to do it, life intervenes. Sweeney Todd can't just go kill the judge. Life happens, and that happens later. Maximus just can't go kill Commodus because he gets captured and has to become a gladiator. To the point that I actually quoted a line from Gladiator in Sweeney Todd, purposely, which is, I'm Sweeney Todd and he will have his revenge, which is a great line from Gladiator. So it is a theme that appeals to me. I am only drawn to damned characters, to big, larger-than-life damned characters. I am incapable of writing little people in Woolworths because they bore me. I can't. No, seriously. I'm in awe.
I didn't even know there were still Woolworths.
Right.
That's awesome.
There you go. I'm in awe of writers who can do that, who can take contemporary life or little human dramas and make them dazzling. I can't do that. That's not my... I worship Chekhov, and I can't do that. That's not what I do. I do something else. So I'm always drawn toward large, dynamic characters who escape, who are you just can't quite grab them because they're so titanically weird.
Another question. Right there, you, ma'am, on the aisle. She's been following your career since Northwestern, was curious about Never the Center and some of your earlier plays, and are you considering making any of those into a movie?
Yeah, no, because to me, plays are plays and movies are movies, and I wouldn't be the person to translate one of my own plays into a movie. That would be for someone else to do, because to me, the plays are the language of theater, and that's how I sort of envision them, whereas movies are a completely different thing for me. But thank you. Another question. We have time for one or two more. All the way on the side in the black hat. We've talked a lot about Sondheim. What was his reaction when he saw the finished film? Watch me perk up with joy. So 5 years I'm working with Steve Sondheim, who I've expressed to you is I admire more than anyone I've ever met, and his approval is very important. First, personally, artistically, commercially, he was involved all the way along. He saw dailies, he was involved in the casting. He knew sort of what was there. Every time something changed radically in the script, I would call him, we would talk about it, but still, the day would come when he'd have to see the rough cut. So it was the very first person Tim showed the rough cut to was Steve Sondheim. So Steve and I went over to London. I spent a week in London before he saw the rough cut, preparing him for the fact that this is a rough cut, and this is what a rough cut is, and there won't be special effects, and the sound isn't mixed, and every possible way I could prepare him.
Sondheim calls that rehearsal. Right,
just rehearsing. So it was Saturday. It was a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. We were staying at the same hotel. We walked over to the screening room. We sat down. I don't think I've ever been as nervous for anything in my life. The movie started, and it played very similar to exactly this cut. And at the end of it, he said, "It's thrilling," And he was excited, and he was on board, and he was engaged and flattered and realized that what we had done was done with respect and honor to his work, and he's been very involved since then, doing press and talking to people about the movie. So it was he loves it, and we're very relieved.
One or two last questions. Right there, you, sir, in the middle in the white shirt. Question was in regards to concocting the great visuals for the movie. There's so many great visual things from the screenplay, but obviously Tim Burton is a great visualist himself. Talk a little about your relationship.
Well, I mean, every director is different. You know, every story is different, every actor is different, every director definitely different. And you know, I've had the pleasure of working with very interesting directors, and they all interact in a different way. I mean, Marty Scorsese has one way of interacting with a writer, and Ridley Scott has a different way, Michael Mann has a different way, and Tim Burton has his way.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Give it to us.
Yeah.
Scorsese's way is what?
Well, Scorsese's way is he's you know, Scorsese's like he metaphorically makes you this big Italian dinner and invites you in and says, let's eat together, and come on, it's fun, and I love this, and you'll love this, and it's very sort of hands-on, and how about this, and how about that, and it's very verbal, very fast, and very, very sort of warm.
And Oliver Stone, not so warm, maybe?
No, well, Oliver was great. Oliver was nothing but heat, and passion, and excitement. You know, love working with Oliver.
Ridley? Anything special or different about Ridley?
Ridley is, you know, I call Ridley Uncle Ridley, because to me he's very avuncular, and he took me under his wing when I was really young, and is responsible for a lot of my success. First with RKO, and then with Gladiator. Just give me those two jobs back to back. And he's the ultimate professional. He's a craftsman, an old world craftsman is what Ridley is. And there's few things more exciting than sitting with Ridley when he starts visualizing, he takes his pencil out and starts drawing, because he sees things very, very visually.
And Burton, finally, for these visuals, does he draw? Does he draw?
He does. But
he started in the animation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what was interesting about Tim is, of all the directors I've worked with, he's the one closest to my own age. So we have the same set of references. You know, we grew up sort of liking the same things. So we would spend as much time talking about Hammer horror movies, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Dracula and the old Universal horror movies, as we would about Sweeney Todd and Mrs. Lovett. So with Tim, it was shared references. We understood the same set of references. You know, I could talk about Fall of the House of Usher, and he would know what I meant. Or he could talk about Roger Corman, or we could talk about this or that. And he's sort of poetic. You know, if Ridley Scott's a general, Tim Burton's a poet. You know, and he expresses himself in sort of beautiful elliptical terms that are really interesting and always sort of provocative and fascinating. I had a thoroughly swell time with Tim from start to last.
Right here, you, ma'am. Are there any other Sondheim musicals that you could see turning into films?
Yeah, I think Follies would make a great movie, and I think much of Sunday in the Park with George would make a great movie.
Right there in the red. Do you have any other advice for aspiring writers?
Yeah, I do, and it's advice no one wants to hear. It's the worst advice in the world, and people hate it when I give it, but it's what I honestly believe. Which is, when I talk to like screenwriting classes, like in colleges or things, you know, what people expect you to say is, well, if you want to be a screenwriter, watch movies. And I say, no, if you want to be a screenwriter, don't watch movies. If you want to be a screenwriter, you first be a writer. You know, what you should do is you should pick up Hamlet, and you should read it. And you should read it again until you understand it. And then when you understand Hamlet, every single word, you should read King Lear. And then you should go to Aeschylus and Euripides and Ibsen and Chekhov and Strindberg and Pinter. You must be a dramatist first. You must understand the men and women who created the form within which you work. You know, you can learn the mechanics of writing a screenplay in an afternoon. You can sit down with Robert Towne's screenplay of Chinatown or Robert Bolt's screenplay of Lawrence of Arabia. You can look at that and say, I understand the brilliance of this. I understand the way this is set out. That will not teach you to be a writer. What will teach you to be a writer is Shakespeare. You know, is the great dramatist of the past. So I say, if you want to write, read. That's it.
I like that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the questions I wanted to get to that I forgot earlier was, there's always a challenge in musicals when, you know, suddenly it seems like someone's going to sing, but if you're not careful, it's like that moment in Monty Python's The Holy Grail where, you know, the son says, I just want to sing, and they're like, no, stop that. How did you guys avoid that? Because it was very seamless.
It was hard. It was a lot of work. You know, as I say, we took the buttons out after numbers, and we also took the down chords out of before numbers. Like if you're watching people on stage, usually you'll hear the orchestra say bing, and they'll start singing because they need to hear that note. Well, we didn't need to do that because it was all pre-recorded. So we took out all of those notes so they could go from speaking very gradually, just taking a breath, and as if they're just exhaling into song was the intention anyway.
I mean, you did a great job. This got a lot of Golden Globe nominations. Congrats on that. I see other nominations definitely in your future. What was the toughest scene? What was the one that really kept you up all night on this film?
It was definitely Epiphany. It was when Johnny goes through the streets, and I was like, how the hell do you do this number? That's the one that kept me up.
The strike. It's going on right now. What are your strike duties? What have you been doing during the strike?
I strike every morning at Sony Studios, the Madison Gate, for I'm on the 6 to noon or 6 to whenever shift, 3 hours or 4 hours. It's important we talk about the strike. How many writers do we have here in the audience? Okay, good.
Good stuff.
The issues that we're striking for are wildly important. They are the future of our industry. It's the same thing directors are interested in and actors are going to be interested in shortly. It is beholden on all of us who are writers to stand by each other. And it's important for all the other artists to stand by other artists. And, I believe very deeply in the issues at stake. I support the Writers Guild 100%. I am out there every day. Every other A-list writer I know is out there every single day. And those of you who are not Writers Guild members, come to a studio, pick it with us, talk to writers, talk about why we're out there. It will be a great much more educational than anything I could say to you tonight is to spend a session walking around a studio with some writers.
It's a very interesting time for intellectual property issues, which is what this is about. The LA Times reported the other day that some writers are considering trying to break away from the studios and doing their own internet shows where they're in control of the distribution, as they, things like YouTube have proven that they can be. What's your view about kind of the intellectual property issues at stake? And it's also funny how the public doesn't exactly understand that the writers are so in control. They've noticed their TV shows have gone off, but when people talk about, other people that are not writers in LA losing their jobs, they forget that those people wouldn't have their jobs if the writer didn't sit down to write a script.
Right. There is a great misapprehension. It's a very good question. I'm glad you raised it. Because we are visual, because we wear our red shirts and we wear our signs, we're walking around the studios, we tend to be the focus of attention. So people have said to me, "Don't you feel bad you're putting people out of work?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, all the waiters from restaurants that are closing down, all the secretaries in studios that are being fired, all the work that's stopping because you're striking. Don't you feel bad about that?" And I say, no. The people who are causing the strike are the producers. It is Summer Redstone. It is Rupert Murdoch. It is Fox and Paramount. It is the producers.
And Sony,
it is not.
right,
It is
GE.
It is Sony and GE and Viacom and CBS. They're the ones not making the deal. All we are asking for is an equitable piece of a huge pie. We are asking for a tiny sliver for filling a blank page with content that makes billions of dollars for those companies.
Well, and there's also no negative cost to a residual.
Right, exactly.
A lot of people don't understand that. It doesn't cost the studios anything. It's only on money that's coming in based on, when somebody wants to buy a DVD of The Aviator, or 5 years from now or 2 years from now, stream it.
Right. And it's also, the other I think vitally important thing to remember is there is a misapprehension that all writers are millionaires, and that it's a billionaires club, and how can those rich people shut down Hollywood? If you don't know this, here's the facts. The median income for a WGA member is $60,000 a year, which is the same as a fireman or a first-year, teacher. We are people who are paying our mortgages, who have kids in school, just like everyone else in Los Angeles. It is not the elite, trying to shut down Hollywood. I don't know a writer out there who doesn't want it to end, but is willing to stay as long as it takes.
Do you see any end in sight? Because that's really the main
I don't really
issue.
have any inside dope.
What were you working on before the strike? What are other projects that you could resume when it's all done?
Well, what I raised my fingers from was a movie for Michael Mann and Will Smith about, ironically, modern media, about a modern media conglomeration. Give us
the pitch. What was it? What was it called?
It's called Empire, and it's about how someone at the bottom of a family-owned media empire like the Murdochs makes his way to the top of the empire, and it's based on Richard III. So you see how much you dig this idea. I know. Will you all come see this movie in 20 years when the strike is over?
What else were you working on? Were you involved with the Lincoln Project? Because I'd read somewhere you were, but it was never clear if you were. The Lincoln Project with Steven Spielberg, right?
Right.
What were you doing?
I mean, I worked on that a while ago. That was years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Was there anything else other than Empire?
There's various things, but that's the one that's the one I'm actively not writing now.
You've been very generous with your time. I can't wait to see what you do next. Give it up again for John Logan.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to screenwriter John Logan for stopping by and spending time with us to discuss his new film, Sweeney Todd. If you dug this episode of the podcast in general, consider tossing a virtual tip into our PayPal virtual tip jar by visiting www.creativescreenwritingmagazine.blogspot.com and look for the PayPal icon. Your tips are appreciated and definitely help out with equipment, hard drives, and all the other stuff we need to keep this podcast running. Of course, feel free to check out my blog, which I even managed to update on the rare occasion that I have time to do so by visiting www.jeffgoldsmith.blogspot.com. You can also always feel free to drop me a line by emailing me at yo.goldsmith@gmail.com, and I'll do my darndest to get back to you as soon as I can. Of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button in iTunes or your podcatching software, because that's how episodes are downloaded automatically every time you click refresh. And if you have a minute, feel free to leave us positive feedback in the iTunes Music Store or at podcastalley.com. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, Senior Editor for Creative Screenwriting Magazine, thanking you again for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.